Imagine a scene of absolute silence, broken only by the rhythmic murmur of a funeral prayer. A body lies wrapped in white cloth, surrounded by grieving villagers. The air is thick with the scent of incense and the weight of sorrow. But just as the final amen is spoken, the impossible happens. The corpse stirs, the white shroud twitches, and then, to the sheer horror of everyone present, the dead woman sits up. Her eyes snap open, not with the dull haze of death, but with a sharp, terrifying clarity. She smiles. It's a smile that chills the blood in your veins. What kind of nightmare is this? Is this a miracle of God or something far more sinister? The truth is, the woman lying in that coffin, Linda, was indeed dead. But what woke up inside her skin wasn't Linda at all. It was something ancient, something evil, a demonic entity summoned by the darkest of black magic. Its goal wasn't just to inhabit a body. It was to destroy an entire family from the inside out. This story isn't just about a possession. It is a tragic tapestry woven with threads of hatred, regret, and a hunger for revenge that transcends the grave. It's about a family torn apart by secrets, a mother who tried to redeem herself, and children whose resentment birthed a monster. So, dim the lights and settle in, because we are about to dive deep into a terrifying true story that will haunt your dreams. This is the tale of Linda and the demon that came back from the dead. Our journey begins in the year 1990 in a remote, sleepy village in Indonesia. In the center of this village stood a large, somewhat imposing house where lived a woman named Linda. She wasn't young anymore, but she carried a heavy burden of the past. Living with her was her youngest daughter, I was the glue holding their fragile world together, the only one who hadn't fled the chaos of Linda's life. It was a night like any other, yet the atmosphere felt heavy, charged with a static that made the hair on your arms stand up. Linda couldn't sleep. Insomnia had been her companion for weeks, a cruel side effect of the unseen forces gathering around her. Restless, she wandered into the living room and opened an old drawer. Inside lay a photograph, faded and worn at the edges. As she stared at it, a wave of emotion crashed over her: sadness, longing, and a profound sense of loss. She sat on the sofa, clutching the picture like a lifeline, lost in memories of a time long past. But while Linda sat in the quiet of her home, miles away, or perhaps in a spiritual dimension just a whisper away, a dark ritual was taking place. In a hidden place, shrouded in shadows, a figure knelt. They weren't praying to the heavens. Oh no, they were slicing into their own flesh, letting fresh blood drip onto the earth as an offering. They were chanting ancient, forbidden words, summoning a demon. They were performing a spell of black magic so potent, so malicious, that its sole purpose was to torture its victim to death. And that victim was Linda. The connection was instant. A cold wind seemed to blow through the sealed walls of Linda's house. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. From the kitchen, a sound echoed. It was the clatter of pots and pans, loud and violent. Linda's heart skipped a beat. At first, she rationalized it. "Ayar, is that you?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. But there was no answer. Just the clatter continuing with a chaotic rhythm. Fear began to creep into her veins, cold and slithering. She stood up, her legs feeling heavy, and walked tentatively toward the kitchen. The house felt different. The shadows seemed longer, darker. As she reached the kitchen doorway, she froze. There, amidst the shadows, she saw them. Hands, black, shadowy hands, reaching out from the darkness, grasping at the air. Before she could even scream, they vanished, dissipating like smoke. She stepped into the kitchen, her breath coming in short gasps. "Who's there?" she whispered. But the room was empty. Then, from behind her, a sound drifted. Not a voice, but a presence. A dragging sound. She followed it, terrified yet unable to look away, towards the dining room, and there it was. A massive, shadowy hand emerged from the darkness, descending upon her. It grabbed her head with a grip of iron. Linda tried to scream, but the sound died in her throat. The force threw her to the floor, dragging her violently across the wooden planks. She clawed at the ground, desperate for purchase, but she was being pulled by an unseen terror toward the front door. The door flew open with a bang, revealing the black, abyssal night outside. In the darkness of the porch, those demonic hands beckoned to her, inviting her into the void. The fear was primal, a raw terror that stripped away all sanity. Linda finally found her voice and let out a blood-curdling scream. The scene shifts and 4 months have passed. That night was just the beginning. Linda was no longer the woman she was. She had wasted away, confined to her bed, her body ravaged by whatever dark curse had taken hold. She wasn't just sick. She was being consumed. Bless her heart, stayed by her side, bathing her face with cool water, trying to soothe the fevers that burned like coals. Every day felt like a lifetime to Linda. Time. It just doesn't pass, she would whisper, her eyes staring vacantly at the ceiling. And when night fell, the real terror began. Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt it, eyes watching her, watching, waiting, hungering. "Mom, it's just us here," Irene would say softly, trying to comfort her. "There's no one else," but Linda knew better. In a voice that didn't sound like her own, she would reply, "No, there's someone else." Then came the heat. It started as a warmth and escalated into an inferno. Linda would writhe in bed, her skin burning to the touch. Ira would rush to wet towels, wiping her mother's face, desperate to lower the temperature. In the quiet intimacy of these caregiving moments, the horror would reveal itself again. As Ira brushed Linda's hair, parting the tangled strands, she froze. Staring back at her from the scalp of her own mother were large, unblinking eyes, eyes that belonged to a beast. They vanished in a second, but the image was burned into Ira's mind. Desperate and alone, Ira did the only thing she could think of. She wrote a letter. It was addressed to a man named Mr. File. File wasn't a doctor or a priest. He was a writer for a magazine, a columnist who people wrote to with their deepest problems, seeking advice or just a shoulder to cry on. Ira poured her heart onto the paper. She wrote about her mother's condition, the inexplicable symptoms, the heat, the hallucinations, and the fact that medical science had offered no answers. She begged for help, not knowing if File would ever read it or if there was even a solution. Meanwhile, Linda's condition worsened. One afternoon, Aya tried to feed her. The soup was lukewarm, but to Linda, it felt like boiling lava. She thrashed, screaming that it was burning her, throwing the bowl across the room. She grabbed a pitcher of water and drank frantically, gulping down the liquid as if she had been wandering a desert for days. But the relief didn't come. Instead, she gagged. Reaching into her own mouth, she pulled out a shard of broken porcelain. In that moment, Linda was gone. The entity looking through her eyes was something else. With a guttural growl, she lunged at Ira, wielding the sharp shard like a dagger. She slashed at Ira's face, cutting her cheek. Ira tried to defend herself, but her mother was possessed by a supernatural strength. Just as Linda raised the shard to plunge it into Ira's eye, she stopped. The haze lifted, if only for a moment. Linda saw her daughter bleeding, saw her own hand holding the weapon. Horror washed over her human face. "What have I done?" She sobbed, collapsing back onto the bed. Ira, terrified and bleeding, knew she couldn't handle this alone. She reached out to her older siblings, Arif and Era, who had fled to the city years ago to escape the stigma of their mother's past. But the response was cold. Era, busy with her own life, refused to come. "Send money if you need to, but I can't come," she said over the phone. Arif was equally distant. He claimed he had no money to travel, that he was barely surviving himself. The rejection stung Ir deeply. She was alone in a house of horrors with a mother who was slowly turning into a monster. That night, as Ira sat down to finish her letter to File, the house seemed to come alive. From the next room, a sound echoed laughter. It was Linda, but it wasn't a sound of joy. It was a dry, rasping, mocking laughter. Ira froze, her pen hovering over the paper. Then silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. Suddenly, Linda was standing in the doorway. She looked frail, but her presence was towering. "I'm so hot," she moaned. And then, before Ira's eyes, the impossible happened. Blood began to pour from Linda's mouth, thick and dark. Mixed with the blood were insect beetles and roaches spilling out from between her lips. Ira screamed, backing away, her dreams of a normal life shattering into a million pieces. The next night brought a new kind of madness. A storm raged outside, rain lashing at the windows. Ira had gone out to mail the letter, seeking a brief escape from the house. When she returned, the door was open. Linda was gone, panic set in. Ira searched the house, the yard, but found nothing. Then she saw it. Clothes scattered on the path leading away from the house. She followed the trail of clothes through the rain-slicked village streets. Villagers, huddled in their homes or seeking shelter, pointed and whispered. "She's gone mad," they said. "She's cursed." Ira found her mother in the cemetery of all places. Linda was lying on top of a grave, naked, her skin pale against the dark earth, laughing maniacally. A crowd had gathered, not to help, but to gawk and jeer. "Shame!" they shouted. "Look at this woman!" Ira's heart broke. She ran to her mother, covering her nakedness with a shawl, wrapping her arms around her trembling frame. "Mom, please!" Ira wept, holding her tight amidst the crowd's judgment. The village chief stepped forward, his face stern. "Take care of your mother," he warned. "If she causes this kind of disturbance again, you and your mother must leave this village." Ira nodded, swallowing her pride and her fear. She dragged Linda home, bathed her, and put her to bed. As she cleaned the dirt from her mother's skin, Linda looked at her with a moment of clarity. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You are the only one who respects me, the only one who stays. And I torment you," Ira cried with her, two souls trapped in a nightmare. A few days later, a miracle, or so it seemed, arrived in the mailbox. A letter from Mr. File. He had read Ira's plea. He didn't have all the answers, but he suspected the cause was not of this world. He suspected black magic. The relief Ira felt was short-lived, however, interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Arif and Era. They had finally come, not out of love, but perhaps out of guilt, or maybe drawn by the invisible threads of the curse. Arif had brought his young daughter Laya, but his wife Nisha was conspicuously absent. They walked into the house, their faces twisted with disgust at the state of the place. The atmosphere was toxic from the start. Arif and Era looked at their mother not with pity, but with resentment. "She's sick," Ir defended. "Doctors don't know what it is. It has to be something else. Something supernatural," Era sneered. "Supernatural? Or maybe just the filth of this house? Any healthy person would go crazy living like this," Ir shot back. "She took care of us. She fed us. She kept a roof over our heads. She sold herself." Era shouted, the family secret spilling out. "That's how she paid for this roof. That's why we left. We couldn't stand the shame." The argument was fierce, digging up old wounds. Arif and Era had left because they couldn't bear the reality of their mother's past as a prostitute. They hated her for it. But Ayare, the youngest, had stayed. She saw the woman, not the profession. That night, the house groaned under the weight of the evil. Linda woke up, but she wasn't herself. Her body levitated off the bed, hovering in the air as if held by invisible strings. Dark, massive hands materialized from the ceiling, grasping at her, pulling her apart. The sound of bones snapping echoed through the room. Her children rushed in, but they couldn't see the hands. They only saw their mother contorted in agony, screaming in a voice that wasn't human. With a final, gasping breath, Linda slumped back onto the bed. She was dead. The silence that followed was deafening. Aya collapsed, sobbing over her mother's body. Even Era and Arif, hardened by their resentment, felt a chill run down their spines. The next morning, the house was filled with the sounds of preparation for the funeral. The village was buzzing with the gossip of Linda's death and her madness. Era stood apart from the others, looking pale and fragile. She was popping pills, hiding them from Ayara. She claimed to be sick, unable to attend the funeral prayer. She apologized to Ayara for her harsh words the previous night, admitting she didn't want to hurt their mother, but she was just so angry. Ayara hugged her, knowing her sister was hiding her own pain specifically. the secret pregnancy she had terminated and the physical and emotional toll it was taking on her. The funeral began. It was a somber affair, the villagers lining up to pray over the body. The imam's voice rose and fell in a rhythmic chant. And then, right in the middle of the prayer, a black cat appeared out of nowhere. It sat near the body for a split second, then leaped over the corpse with unnatural agility, vanishing into the crowd. A gasp went through the mourners. And then the sound of breathing. Loud, ragged, rasping breathing coming from the shroud. Before anyone could react, Linda sat up. She tore the cloth from her face. She was dead pale, her eyes sunken, but she was smiling. A wide, terrifying grin that promised nothing but pain. Panic erupted. People ran, screaming that the dead had risen. A doctor was summoned, trembling as he checked her pulse. She was in a coma, he stammered, trying to find a logical explanation. She must have gone into a deep state that mimicked death. But she's alive now. She's fine. Linda looked at her children. We are family now, she said, her voice strange, almost robotic. No more fighting. Especially now that we have a grandson. She pulled Laya close. The change in her was jarring. Gone was the sick, frail woman. She was up, cleaning the house, cooking elaborate meals, smiling endlessly. It was too perfect. Arif, however, was skeptical. Is that really Mom? He asked Era under his breath. Or is it something wearing her skin? Strange occurrences continued. Linda had started writing with her left hand, a trait she never possessed before. And then there were the nights. One night, Arif woke to the sound of the TV blaring in the living room. He went to check and saw Linda sitting there, staring at a screen that was displaying nothing but static. She didn't answer when he called her. In the dim light, he watched in horror as she began to peel the skin off her own hand, strip by strip. She turned her head slowly, her face morphing into a grotesque, rotting mask. I came for the promise, she hissed. Then she melted into the sofa, vanishing completely. Arif ran to the sofa, but it was empty. He looked at the TV, and there she was, trapped inside the screen, screaming. He woke up with a jolt. It was a dream. But the fear was real. The terror wasn't confined to Arif, was suffering her own demons. She went to the bathroom, the secret of her abortion weighing heavily on her soul. She washed away blood, and in the bucket of water she saw a fetus floating. She blinked, and it was gone. She was losing her mind, and Linda knew. She looked at Ara with eyes that saw everything. You could have had a grandson, Linda said softly, a cruel smile playing on her lips. But you killed him, just like you hated your mother for who she was, Era snapped. I'm not you. I will never be you. The house was a powder keg of suppressed trauma and supernatural dread. The climax was approaching. Desperate, contacted Fael again. The letter described the resurrection, the cat, the unnatural behavior. Fael realized the severity. This was no ordinary haunting. He decided to come to the village himself. Meanwhile, the siblings turned to traditional methods to verify their fears. Following a method Phil had hinted at in his letters, they placed a plate with a special drink and a raw egg under Linda's bed. They chanted, praying for the truth. The egg, left overnight, was retrieved the next morning. It was black. Inside, it was filled with maggots. There was no doubt left. Linda was under a powerful black magic curse. And worse, the demon hadn't just possessed her. It was there to collect a debt. The storm that had been brewing over the village finally broke. Heavy rain trapped them in the house. Fal arrived, just in time to deliver the terrifying truth. He sat the siblings down. There's a rule in this dark magic, he explained gravely. If a sorcerer casts a death spell, the victim must die and stay dead. The demon comes to collect the soul, but, he paused, if the victim comes back to life before burial, the demon's contract is broken. It cannot take the intended soul, so it goes after the person who casts the spell. The sorcerer, he looked at them, his eyes searching their faces. Era was the first victim, but she survived. That means she didn't cast the spell. Era is innocent. All eyes turned to Arif. The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Arif, the son who hated his mother for being a prostitute. The son who, when he was desperate for money, went to her begging. The son whose wife, Nisha, had left him because of his pride and poverty. In his rage and desperation, Arif had sought out a witch doctor. He had performed the ritual. He had planted the cursed cloth under his mother's roof to kill her slowly, to make her suffer. He wanted revenge. He wanted her gone, but he hadn't counted on her coming back. He hadn't counted on the demon wanting payment. Arif broke down, his facade crumbling. "I just wanted it to end," he cried. I didn't know this would happen, but his regret was useless. The debt had to be paid. That night, the house became a prison. The demon, wearing Linda's skin, no longer pretended. It showed its true form, a towering, grotesque entity with elongated limbs and a face of pure malice. Era, separated from the others in the bathroom, was the first to fall. She heard a baby crying in the pipes. The walls bled. She saw her mother's reflection in the mirror, laughing. In her panic, she slipped on the wet floor, hitting her head on the shattered glass of the mirror. She lay dead in a pool of her own blood and water. Fael and Arif tried to stick together, but the house was alive with shadows. Laya, the innocent granddaughter, was taken. The demon snatched her, hiding her in the dark corridors. Ari screamed for her daughter, her voice raw with terror. "Laya!" "Where are you?" Arif knew what he had to do. It was the only way to stop the demon and save the rest of his family. He remembered the witch doctor's words. The cursed cloth, the source of the magic, had to be found and burned. If he burned it, the magic would break. But he had to do it. He ran out into the torrential rain, digging frantically in the garden where he had buried the talisman months ago. The mud was thick, the rain blinding him. He dug until his fingers bled. Finally, he touched it, the dark, oily cloth. Inside the house, the chaos was absolute. Ira saw walls covered in hundreds of demonic hands. They reached for her, choking her. She fought them off, her only thought to get to Laya. "Laya!" She cried again. She saw a small figure standing near the window. It was Laya, but as Aya ran to her, Laya turned. Her face was blank, her eyes void. "Grandma is a demon," the child said in a monotone voice. "She told me to do this." Laya turned and began to bang her head against the glass window, hard and rhythmic. "No, Laya, stop!" Ira screamed. But an invisible force held Ira back. The demon stood in the corner of the room, its long neck stretching towards the ceiling, its laughter vibrating the walls. "A promise is a promise," the demon gurgled. "Your mother's soul is mine, but since she cheated death, I will take yours and yours. And yours." It lunged for Laya. Just as its claws were about to tear the child apart, File stepped forward. He wasn't just a writer. He was a man of knowledge, a spiritual warrior of sorts. He chanted verses, throwing holy water, creating a barrier. The demon shrieked, recoiling. Outside, Arif struck a match. His hands were shaking so hard he nearly dropped it. The rain hissed as the flame met the cursed cloth. It took a few tries, but finally the fabric caught fire. The blaze was unnatural, burning blue and bright. Inside, the demon froze. Its power was tethered to that cloth. As it burned, the demon began to writhe. "No?" it howled. Its body started to disintegrate, turning to ash and smoke. The agreement, the debt, but the curse was a tricky thing. The demon might be leaving Linda's body, but the blood debt still demanded a soul. And the one who summoned it was Arif. The smoke from the burning cloth drifted back toward the house. It swirled around Arif in the garden. The ground beneath him softened, turning into quicksand. Hands, skeletal and gray, erupted from the earth, grabbing his ankles. "No, I burned it! I stopped it!" Arif screamed. But it was too late. The demon had to take someone. Linda was safe. The rest were spared. The price was the caster. The earth opened up, swallowing Arif whole. He didn't even have time to scream. He was dragged down into the abyss, paying the ultimate price for his hatred. The rain stopped. The house fell silent. Ira rushed to Laya, hugging her tightly. File opened the doors, letting the fresh air in. Linda's body lay still on the bed, finally at peace, her soul released from the torment. The next morning, the sun rose over a changed world. 3 graves stood in the cemetery. Now Linda, Era, and Arif, Ayare, and Laya were the only ones left. File placed a hand on Ira's shoulder. He handed her an envelope. "She wanted you to have this," he said. "From a long time ago," Aya opened it. Inside was a letter written by Linda and a photograph of a young, beautiful woman, Linda herself, standing next to File. She never told me, File said softly, but I loved her, and I believe she loved me. But she thought she was tainted, that her past made her unworthy. She pushed me away to save me from her life. The letter confirmed it. Linda had been pregnant once before with File's child. That child was Ayar. Ire looked at File, tears streaming down her face. She had a father. She wasn't alone. Ayar looked at her daughter, Laya. The little girl was standing a few feet away, dressed in black, staring at the house. Beside Laya sat the black cat. The cat purred, rubbing against the girl's legs. Laya looked at her mother, and for just a split second, her eyes held a glint of something ancient, something knowing. The demon was gone, the curse was lifted. But in the world of the supernatural, evil never truly dies, it just waits. And as the wind whispered through the trees of the Indonesian village, one couldn't help but wonder, had the curse really ended, or had it just found a new vessel? This story is a testament to the destructive power of hatred and the tragic consequences of meddling with forces beyond our control. It reminds us that the dead should be allowed to rest, and that the sins of the parent can sometimes visit the children, unless love is strong enough to break the cycle.